Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Get Your Goat Golf Podcast. My name is Jake Dickerson, and I am a subpar golfer who will guide you through this absurd, infuriating, and often hilarious world of golf. Now, when I say that I am subpar, that doesn't mean that I'm shooting scores that are below par. That means my golf game is actually subpar, as in not in the good way. Now, the concept of this podcast will be to talk about all things golf from the perspective of a high handicap golfer. Now, the format is we'll do some solo stuff and we'll do some interviews and we'll talk to people about all sorts of things golf related, whether it be the downright ridiculous things that have happened, whether or not we're talking about funny stories to rants, just everything golf related. Now, I guess talk about a little bit about myself and my infatuation or love for the game. I am a 47-year-old happily married father of three, and in my real job, I am the local magistrate here in my town. I also coach basketball. I officiate football and basketball. So I stay pretty busy. But I do, like I said, I do love golf, and I do thankfully try to get out as much as I can. And thankfully, I do have a very loving and supportive wife who allows me to go golfing. In fact, sometimes she goes out and golfs with me, and it's great because she doesn't even care that I suck. Now, the concept of this podcast will be hopefully to share stories with other listeners, talk to other golfers, whether they be high handicap, low handicap, maybe even talk about some tips and some advice. Because like I said, even though I am a very not good golfer, like I said, I love the game and I do want to improve, and I do try to take steps to improve my game. So I've started some of those things this year, and so maybe we can even talk about some of those things, and you can join me on my journey to go from being a subpar golfer in not the good way to being a subpar golfer in the good way. Now, when I first got introduced to golf, I was probably 13, 14 years old, and I was introduced to golf by my father, like a lot of kids are. But I remember, my dad wasn't a golfer. So what had happened was he was introduced to golf when I was about 13 or 14 years old. I remember him coming home one day. He had this used set of golf clubs. I'm sure that he either was given or got from a garage sale, something like that. And he had indicated that he was going to start golfing. He had joined a league from the other prison guards that he worked with. That they were going to start doing on Thursday afternoons. And I remember thinking, what a dork. Golf? And I just remember thinking that golf was I don't know, an uppity sport. I didn't think it was the same type of thing as at that time, football, baseball, basketball. Those are the things that I was into. So I thought it was silly. But I loved my dad. Like I said, everything that my dad liked, I wanted to like too. So I started golfing with him. I would actually go to him with at those golf leagues on Thursdays. He'd bring me along, and I wouldn't actually golf, but I would swing the club around here and there. I could remember there was another kid about my age that would come as well, and we wouldn't golf in the league, but we'd be there half hour early, and we'd go out in the putting range and practice our putts, and then every now and then we'd get to take some shots here and there. And I remember doing that for the first year or two until I don't remember when it was I actually got my first set of clubs. Don't remember what kind of clubs they were. I know they were used. But then I do remember I started actually going golfing with my dad. We'd go out a handful of times every summer. I can remember specifically the place that we went to at the time. It was called Hills Brothers Golf Course. It was a little, I wouldn't say a par 3 golf course, but it was a shorter golf course. It had 3 par 3s. It had 6 par 4s, but 2 or 3 of the par fours were reachable if you really, really hit a good drive. So it was similar to a par 3 course, but there was 3 or 4 legitimate par 4 holes. And I guess when I say legitimate, I don't necessarily mean legitimate. I mean like 350, 375, something that you couldn't reach on a drive. So it was a rail you had to get on into and 2-putt to par it. And we would play that course, and I can remember it. What I specifically remember about it, we would go the twilight, which was after 6 o'clock. There was no carts. You had to walk. They didn't have carts on the course. But if you went twilight, you can do 9 holes for $3.50. So that's what me and my dad did, and that's essentially where I learned to play golf, was at Hills Brothers. And that course is still around. They call it the Cascade Short Course now. But man, I haven't played that course in 20, 25 years. I just really have no desire to walk the course is the big thing. But I really should take my kid and play that course, walk it, and let him play the course that I learned to play on. I think that would actually be really cool. But yeah, that was the course that I learned on. I learned everything that I know about golf in the beginning was from my dad, which might explain the high handicap, because my dad also was never a good golfer. I can remember it was until I was an adult that I actually really believed that you were allowed 2 mulligans per round. That was a rule that my dad had taught me. I was very disappointed to learn that that's not actually the case. Not allowed mulligans at all. I also thought you were allowed to use what was called a foot wedge if your ball was in a bad spot. So I learned a lot of bad things from my dad, but I wouldn't take those lessons back for anything in the world. And that's, I think, one of the things that really brought me to really love and appreciate golf as I got older, was that it was a sport that I could actually play with my dad. Well, when he was well into his 50s and 60s. I can remember I would play as I got older. It seemed like in the summer, we would still, when I was in my 20s and 30s, we would still go play once a week, sometimes at that Hills Brothers course, sometimes at other courses, because as he got a little bit older, even though he didn't like to do a ride cart, he would do it. But the main reason that he didn't like to do a ride cart is because he was cheap and didn't want to pay for it. He liked just to walk, and he said he would get his exercise in. But as he got older, and I would pay for the golf, and we would ride. But that's what I can remember, and I tell that to my kids nowadays, is that I really want them to play golf, because it's something that I can do with them, even as I get older. Now, I played pretty regularly, but I was never good. I mean, I would shoot. If I had a good round, I was shooting mid to low 40s on 9. But a lot of times it was upper 40s, low 50s. And if I was really struggling that day, it would be mid 50s. And that's keeping in mind that I would be using a mulligan. I would be using a foot wedge. So I was never great. Like I said, I think when I was really golfing a lot, I would probably be in that mid 40 range. And then I slowed down when I went to law school. When I went to law school, I just didn't have time for that 3 or 4 year period. I probably would golf maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And that obviously didn't help a poor golfer's game very much. And then when I got out of law school, I tried to golf a little bit more. That was actually when I got the first set of clubs that I remember that I actually bought myself new was when I graduated from law school. Bought a thing of Nike slingshots at the time, which was the hot thing. But then as my dad got a little bit older and started getting arthritis in his hands, and then eventually got cancer and passed away. And so that was my main golf partner. And I just didn't golf as much. I would golf here and there, maybe a scramble or 2 every year, but nothing to really actually improve my game. Now, when I really got back into golf was when COVID hit. when COVID hit and everything shut down, we were working from home. Restaurants were closed. Everything was closed. But the first thing that actually opened up was golf courses. They allowed you to golf, which was fantastic. And so my buddy Brian had reached out to me and Nick and Brad, and we started regularly golfing on Fridays. Every Friday we would go golfing, and then we'd hit it up a couple times here and there, more than that. So that summer, I got to fall in love with golf again. That was back in 2020. And just really fell in love with it. And that was when I went on my first ever golf trip. Brian and a group of guys had been doing it for several years, but they needed somebody that year, invited me to go. And so the concept is there's about 20 of us that go up north, somewhere up north Michigan for 3-4 day of golfing and mayhem. And it was a great time, and I loved it. And I think I went on another 2 golf outings that year where we went up north somewhere else. And like I said, I just fallen back in love with golf. And ever since then, that love hasn't dissipated. And now, God, it's really one of the only things I think about. About a year or 2 ago, I got to that age where, basketball really wasn't working out for me anymore. That was the sport that I really loved to play. I played basketball and softball pretty regularly as an adult. But it got to be where it hurt more than it was fun. And then I just couldn't compete with those young guys anymore. So then I just decided, okay, I'm done playing basketball, done playing softball. Let's focus full time on golf. And that's what I did. And now it's, like I said, that's all I think about. It's what I describe as the best, worst game ever. What do I mean by that? Like I said, there's certain things about golf that, God, they're so infuriating. Just so bad. It just doesn't make sense. It's literally a sport that you can never conquer. It's not a sport that you can beat. I don't go out there with the idea that you're going to go beat these certain players that you're playing with. A lot of times we're not even playing like that. It's you versus yourself. It's you versus the course. And that can be super infuriating, and it can be super humbling at times. It's one of those things where, God, and it seems like this happens to me quite regularly. Like I said, when I had this high handicap, but there's times where I'm hitting the ball very well, but it just seems like I can't consistently do that for the whole round. Or if I'm out there and I'm driving the ball well, then all of a sudden I'm not hitting as well, or I'm not chipping, I'm not putting, things like that. But then there's other times where the next time I go out where I can't drive the ball to save myself. But I am putting well. And it's one of those things where it's just like, God, if I could just put everything together, I just feel like it's right there. And it's one of those things where just whenever you feel like you're so frustrated and you just want to quit, and that you just don't want to do golf anymore, all of a sudden you hit that nice flush shot that you just remember, and it's like, God, I can do this. I am good at golf. And so you chase that shot again, and you come out and you do it again the next time. And then the next time everything else has changed and something else isn't good. I don't know how many times that I've been working on something at the driving range, and I think I've got it figured out. And then as soon as I go out to that golf course, I don't have anything figured out. This last golf outing that we went on, it was funny. I was talking to Brian, and we golfed 18 holes on Thursday, and then the next day we do 18 in the morning, take a lunch, do 18 in the afternoon. And quite frankly, I'm not used to golfing 18. Most of the year when I go golf, I usually do only 9 holes. It seems like we do 18 when I do scrambles and things like that, which I do a handful of scrambles every year. But usually when I go out with my wife or a couple of my buddies, we do 9. And so I've actually had a couple of times when I've gone out for 18 just regular golfing, and I'm golfing pretty well. And then all of a sudden I get to hole 13 or 14, and all of a sudden I just can't swing right anymore. I've been hitting my irons well all day, and all of a sudden I can't hit my irons anymore. And I think that has to do with just not being used to doing those 18 holes. But so when we did this golf outing this last just a couple of weeks ago, on Thursday we went up to a golf course called the Tribute, which is a beautiful golf course. God, the scenery there is just gorgeous. But I golfed pretty well. I was hitting the ball pretty well until towards the end. And like I said, towards the end, after swinging that many times, and there might have been some alcohol involved too. But I don't even really remember how those last few holes went. I just know it wasn't as good as the first 14 or 15 holes, but I golfed pretty well. And then so the next morning we get up to golf at 7 a.m. on Friday. And, I didn't golf bad on Friday morning. I couldn't drive the ball to save myself. And the course that we played up there, it does have very narrow fairways, so you have to hit it straight. But other than when I would pull out my 3-wood or an iron on a hole that driver just wasn't in play to begin with, other than those type of shots, I didn't put a single driver in play that first round of 18. Not a single. I mean, I lost 13 or 14 balls just on drives. But I was hitting my irons well. I was hitting my irons very well. I mean, 150 yards in, I was putting it on the green. Not always with a makeable putt at the end of that, but I was putting it close enough to two putt, and sometimes one putt. And I was putting decently. So wasn't a horrible round, but it wasn't great because of the drives. The drives are frustrating to me. But then we took our little lunch, and then in the afternoon, I didn't hit anything well. Didn't put another driver in play, but then I couldn't hit my irons either. I was shaking everything. And I can remember on Friday night, like the last couple holes, Brian had caught up to us on those last couple of holes, and he had told me that it looked like I was contemplating life itself. And sometimes that's how golf feels. Sometimes you get out there and you just wonder, like, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I paying money to go out here and be miserable? But we do. And like I said, I went to bed that night frustrated. I probably lost close to 20 balls on those 36 holes. And then just was like contemplating my golf game and what was I doing wrong. But then, I went to bed that night and woke up the next morning ready to golf 18 more and was just as excited as could be. It was like that. It was a new opportunity, a new day, a new game. And I know that I can play the game. And I went out there Saturday morning and played well. I was driving the ball well, hit my irons well. I definitely had my best round of the whole time up there on that Saturday. But then Saturday afternoon, everything was bad. But everything was bad for everybody. By that time, we're talking about 80, 90 holes over the last couple of days, lots of drinks. So nobody really plays well on Saturday afternoon. But Saturday morning, I was great. And like I said, that's one of those things that is so frustrating about the game is that you can do well and in the same round do bad and then not even know what it is that you're doing bad or why you're doing it bad. But you know that you can do good. And so I think that's one of the things that is so infuriating about golf. But like I said, you chase that one great shot because we've all hit them. We've all hit that shot where you just hit it perfect. And I think I heard somebody once say that what was so good about golf, and they compared it to other sports, like, for instance, for baseball. I'm never going to be able to throw a 99-mile-per-hour fastball. Just never going to be able to do it. It's not physically possible. Right now, I'm not going to ever have a 40-inch vertical where I can dunk the basketball like LeBron James. But every single person has those moments where they hit a tour quality shot in golf. The difference is you just can't do it consistently. So I think that's what's so different about golf compared to the other sports, is that everybody has the capability to do well. You don't have to be super athletic. You don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to have any certain type of frame or build, quickness, anything like that. Anybody can go out there and hit good golf shots. And so that's one of the things that is so great about golf as well. I think what's so great about it as well is just the camaraderie of it. I mean, there's nothing better than going out with your buddies and hitting balls around. And quite frankly, at least the group of guys that I'm with, nobody cares what I shoot. Nobody cares what my score was. I don't care what anybody's score was. Did I have a good time with those guys? And that's what golf is to me. Now, one of the topics that I wanted to talk about, and I guess will kind of be a theme as we continue on with this podcast, is, like I said, I'm doing certain things right now. I'm taking the game serious, and there's a bunch of things that I feel that I can do to take the game more serious. One of those things that everybody told me was that, hey, you got to go get fitted. It'd be the best money you ever spent. And so I thought about that, and I've been wanting to do it. And I told my wife I wanted to do it. And so this year she actually surprised me. And she had set up a golf fitting at a place in Ypsilanti, Michigan here called Miles of Golf, which is a very cool place. And so what you do is you take your set of golf clubs in with you, and you take a couple of swings, and they kind of analyze your shot, your swing, your flight path, all that kind of stuff. And then they start fitting you with some of the newer clubs, different models, different brands, different shafts, different weights, things like that. And then when it's all said and done, it was a couple-hour process. When it's all said and done, they give you some options on set of clubs that actually fit your size, your style, your swing type. And everybody that I talked to said it was the best money that they ever spent. And so one of the cool things about that is, I mean, I don't remember how much it cost because it was something that my wife set up for me, but it was a couple $100. But if you end up buying the clubs, that couple $100 actually goes off the clubs. So she actually set it up as like a cool little date for us where both of us were going to go get fitted. And it was fantastic. Because like I said, I've never been fitted before. Like I had said earlier, the first set of clubs that I ever bought was when I graduated law school about 15, 16 years ago. And I bought a off the rack set of Nike slingshot. And I bought a driver. At the time, it was the Nike Sumo driver. I'm sure everybody remembers it, the big box yellow driver that sounded like a tin can. Like I still have it. It's this one right here. If anybody remembers this. I mean, look at this thing. It's crazy. And I remember being so excited about getting it, because I loved Tiger Woods at the time. Tiger Woods was using Nike stuff, so I thought that was great. But it was a couple years ago, back in 2020, when I fell in love with golf again, that I decided, okay, maybe it's time for some new clubs. And once again, I went and I bought a set of TaylorMades off the rack, TaylorMade Sims. And then I had actually gotten a driver from this place called Dollar Drive Club. They allowed you to try different drivers, and you can return it if you didn't like it. And so that was the first time that I had actually, as I'm trying to put this club together, when it starts talking about the shafts and the stiffness and the flex and things like that. And I'd actually never, ever even heard of that before. Didn't even know what that meant. And so as I'm kind of reading on about it, it basically said for my size and my swing speed that I needed probably a stiff shaft, extra stiff, something like that. And so I was like, God, I wonder if that's what I had. So, I went and I looked at this Nike club that I had. And I'm looking at it, and I can't see it. It said something on it. I said, God, what does it say? I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, that's what it was. The only thing that I had noticed about it was that it said, had a W on it. And I remember thinking, well, what does the W mean? And so I looked it up, and W actually meant that it was a woman's club. And I had no idea of that. And so, yeah, I had that Nike driver, that's a woman's driver, for 15 years. Now, I actually looked up to see, what's the difference between a woman's driver and a men's driver. And basically what it had said was, for one, usually a woman's driver, the shaft is usually a flex shaft, because women tend to not swing as hard, which obviously that was a problem because everything that I read said that I needed a stiff shaft. And then it also had said that usually the shaft is a little bit shorter than a men's shaft. And they had also talked about the loft on the driver itself. And loft was, once again, it was something that I had no idea about. And so when I looked at it, it was a 13-degree loft, which meant nothing to me at the time. But 13 is pretty high. And then when I actually put the driver next to my buddy's driver, it was a good 2 inches shorter than his driver. So with that being said, it was like, okay, I definitely need a new driver. And at the time, I tried a TaylorMade Sim that I liked. It was decent, but I ultimately went with, at the time, it was a Callaway Maverick driver that I liked. I got a stiff shaft. I don't remember if it was a 10.5-degree loft, but you could adjust the loft. You can adjust it from 9 to all the way to 11, something like that. And so that was the driver that I got. I ended up getting a Callaway 3-wood as well. And that's what I used. And I liked it. But I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't hit it much different than I was hitting the Nike driver. I hit my drives a pretty long way, but I also have the tendency to slice a lot of my drives, which usually has nothing to do with the driver itself. That's my swing, and I know that. But it was just this past year when, like I said, my wife decided she was going to set this date up for us to go and actually look at getting sized. And so we went up there. And they didn't let us do it together. We were in separate rooms, and so there was going to be a session for your irons. There was going to be a session for the woods, and you had to take a break in between, because they said a lot of times you don't do a whole full sitting in one day because you get tired. But we were doing a full sitting in one day because it's about an hour away from us, which neither one of us really like to drive and don't have a whole lot of time to go do something like that anyway. So I started with my wood, or no, I started with my irons. Got fitted with my irons. They let me hit some Titleist irons. I'd hit some Callaway Paradigms. I'd hit the newest TaylorMades. I hit some Mizunos. I hit some Pings. Actually, let me change that. I did not hit irons first. I actually did not hit woods first. That's right. I started with the drivers. Same thing. I hit the Ping 430. I hit the TaylorMade. What is it? Stealth? Whatever the new TaylorMade is. The Callaway. Hit the Cobra. Hit the Titleist. And one of the things that he had said right off the bat with my swing was I had a fast swing speed, and he had said I definitely needed a even stiffer shaft than I had. He said I needed an extra stiff shaft, and I needed a heavier shaft and a heavier head. And so when I swung all those clubs in my mind, I was looking at the Callaway or the TaylorMade because that's what I've had in the past. But the two I liked the best, I liked the Ping a lot, and I liked the Titleist a lot. And so ultimately, when I was done hitting, I ultimately ended up going with the Ping 430. I really liked it. Felt good. They had said that it was the heaviest head, which was good for my height. I'm 6'2", 6'3", and have that fast swing speed. And he had said that that would help. And I was roping that ball at the sessions. Like I said, one of the very first balls I had hit was straight, and it went 310. And I don't think I've ever hit a ball that straight and far before. Now, they weren't all going like that. I mean, I was still slicing. I was still hooking. Like I said, I know I didn't go in there with the idea that a brand new golf club's going to all of a sudden make me a good golfer. I knew that. I know it's the swing. But that driver did feel good. And so that's what I chose. And so then in the afternoon session is when we went with the irons. So I'd had all those different irons. I don't know if I had said Mizuno in there or not as well. But I'd heard good things about Mizunos. So I kind of went in there with the idea that Mizunos, and then I was thinking Pings just because I chose Pings for the woods. And so when it was said and done, I didn't like the TaylorMades. I didn't like the Callaways at all. They just didn't feel good. But I did like the Mizunos. I liked the Pings. And I liked the Titleist too. The Titleists were a little different, though. It had a weird feel to it, like when it came off the ball. But I did actually hit them pretty well. And so when I was actually speaking to the guy about it, he had kind of said the same thing. He thought that I needed a heavier and stiffer shaft than what I had had. And I didn't realize that there was different stiffness on steel shafts. That threw me off a little bit. I thought like that only dealt with graphite type shafts. So I thought when you had steel that it was as stiff as they could come. And then he explained no. He explained I needed the extra stiff shaft. And the irons that I had had at the time, I think they were maybe a 80 gram. I don't know if it's grams if I'm saying that right, but it was an 80 weight on them. And what they had sized me with was 130 grams. So quite a big difference. And that's what I ended up going. I ended up, when it was all said and done, he had told me the Titleist were $50 a club more. And so I didn't think that they were worth $50 more. And I didn't even know if I liked them better than the Pings or not. So it ultimately came down to choosing between the Pings and the Mizunos, or the ones that actually felt the best. And they were about the same price. So I went with the Pings 430s for the simple reason that I got the woods. And so that's what I did. I ordered those and then I got them. Now, there was a little snafu with the ordering process. I'll talk about that in another episode. But I've got the clubs now, and I've actually played several rounds with them now, and I love how they feel. I don't know necessarily that my game has improved that much or not. Actually, the last couple times out, I've been struggling with the driver again, slicing it. Like I said, that's not the club. That's me. I know that. But the irons feel really good, and I feel like I'm hitting the irons pretty well. I like how they come off the club, and I have to think that difference in the shaft is really making the difference. I don't think it's the club itself. I think it's the difference in the shaft. I mean, if I took the TaylorMades that I had before that and went with the 130 extra stiff shaft, I'm sure I'd probably be hitting those just the same as I'm hitting these new Pings. But I love them. So I guess the point of this story was the process itself of getting fitted was a great process. I mean, I would recommend it to anybody. I've actually recommended it to a couple of people at work already. It was just a cool process. So you got to learn some things about your swing. You get to learn what type of club actually fits best with your swing, with your style of play. Which, I mean, just when you think about that concept in itself, it just is just a better concept in general. I mean, if you're going to want to go out there and play as good as you can possibly play, you should have the tools that allow you to play the best that you can possibly play that are actually fitted to your style. So I would highly recommend it. Anybody that's from Michigan, like I said, Miles of Golf was great. Their customer service was great. So I'll talk about the snafu in a different episode, but that really wasn't anything to do with them. It was more to do with pain itself. But as of right now, I love the clubs. I've only done a couple rounds with them, but I love them. So I'll keep you updated on how it goes and if I still love that process. But like I said, I would highly recommend, as it was recommended to me, to go get fitted. So, God, we're already at 35 minutes. That's actually longer than I planned to talk for the first ever Get Your Goat podcast. Now, I guess if you've made it this far, I thank you. Welcome along. I'm hoping that you'll subscribe. I'm hoping that you'll share and tell people other people about this podcast. I would love for you to comment and share stories and different topics that you might want me to cover, things that you think that I could do better, things that you really liked. If you think that you would make a good guest on the podcast, I'm always going to be searching for guests because really I would like to have guests instead of just listening to me talk, because I don't know that I'd want to listen to me talk, but those that are here listening to me talk, thank you so much. But until the next episode, just remember, if you're not hitting them good, just swing harder. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.